Welcome to In Focus, a podcast from Windsor Leadership with Liz Ward. I'm delighted today to be joined by Helen Boaden, our new chair. Good morning, Helen.
Hello.
Lovely to have you with us. And I understand you're going to be unpacking a little bit more about what Windsor leadership means to you, and perhaps about what leadership over the coming year might entail and some of the key themes that we might be looking out for. So first of all, can you provide us with a short flavour of who you are for those who perhaps don't know in detail?
A short flavour of who you are is a very tall order, but I will talk about my career. Well, I started life in local radio, career-wise, first of all commercial and then the BBC. And I always knew what I didn't want to do, but I never quite knew what I did want to do. People think I had a plan and I genuinely never did. But for example, at a period in my life, I definitely didn't want to go to London. So I moved from Leeds over to Manchester, despite having some good opportunities in London. And I do think there's a lesson there. Trust your gut. It really helps you when you have these kind of career dilemmas. From local radio, I moved into network. I loved reporting. I won some awards for my reporting, which in many ways I'm still prouder of than anything else. Eventually, I did move to London for love, followed the man who became my husband and who I've been with for nearly 40 years. At some point, I overcame a kind of hesitancy and applied to be controller of Radio 4. And to my absolute amazement, got the job, and that was a blissful job. There's nothing better for a radio person who loves speech than running Radio 4. And then I got one of those offers you can't refuse from the Director General, Mark Thompson, who said, we'd like you to run BBC News. And I thought, oh, blimey, not for me, tin hat job. But it was an offer you couldn't refuse. I mean, it's when you realise that institutions have plans for you as well as you having your own plans. So I went to news, which was incredibly challenging, at times absolutely brutal, but which I learned a lot about people, situations, politics, both big politics and small politics. And I think I learned to defend the values of the BBC: impartiality, independence, sticking to your values, in a way that actually you only can see when you look back. And then I became director of BBC Radio, again, a glorious job, because of course, you know, it took me back to my first love. And at a certain point, it was time to swim away from the BBC. And that was a hard decision, but not one I've ever regretted. The BBC gave me a lot, but actually you discover beyond an institution, there's a lot of richness out there. So I'm a non-exec, I'm the chair of my local theatre here in Scarborough, the Stephen Joseph Theatre. I'm on the Royal Academy Council. I'm involved with various health charities. And of course, I'm involved with lovely Windsor leadership, which started because I was asked to talk about being a senior woman at the BBC. And then it grew and they asked me to chair, and I found I loved that. I loved the growing of people, being the glue. You know, it's a very interesting, responsible role, even if you're, slightly back from the main action. And then, slightly to my amazement, but I was very honoured, I was asked to join the board and then to become chair. So I'm chair and chair.
Wonderful. And we're delighted to have you.
Well, thank you very much.
From your involvement at Windsor Leadership, what have you learned that's had the most impact on your leadership?
I think the thing I've most got from Windsor is the power of listening, which of course is ironic given the fact I'm a radio person and should have clocked that before, and did in some senses. But at the heart of the Windsor leadership experience is the power of listening intently. And it's where the magic happens. And it's the magic between people coming together and really hearing each other. So for me, the first time I went on a program, which was the senior leader program, they did this, the facilitator did this simple technique, which is you presented your dilemma to your group. And by this time, you're quite trusting of the group. And then she made you turn your chair to look out of the window and listen to how they discussed your dilemma. And it sounds almost like a party game, but actually it's profoundly different from seeing the faces. You hear the words, you hear the ideas, you hear the affection and respect that perhaps you're not showing yourself, and something shifts in you, and it's fun. I mean, it's a very clever way of getting to some quite profound and practical things. So that was one example of the Windsor leadership. But equally, when I've chaired, in one of the courses for younger leaders or less experienced leaders, they share a story about sort of something that didn't go so well and what they learned from it. And there was this lovely guy, I remember, talking about going into an environment where, I think it was a building environment, where he kind of intuited that safety wasn't being taken as seriously as it should. There's lots of ways you spot that, just not the right clothes, you know, a bit casual, a bit matey. And this was all going on in his head, but he was too young, too unconfident, and too willing to please the blokes to say anything. And there was quite a serious accident. And the thing that moved me about it, and it did genuinely move me, and I learned a lot from him, was, of course, the health and safety executive just crawled all over them, this company. And you could have been very defensive in that situation. And he just said it was the best thing that kind of ever happened to me. You know, we worked fully with them. I learned so much from them. And he said, even 10 years on, I think about that incident. And I looked around the room as chair, and we were gripped by this story because we all had equivalents. And the point is not to just spot what's gone wrong. It's to really explore what you learned from it. The learning is critical, because otherwise it can be a bit of a, you know, we all sit around and weep. Not that we do weep, but, you know, you can over empathize and not move it on. And what I think Windsor is brilliant at doing, and it's partly the facilitation and it's partly the peer group, is yes and. So what did you learn from that? So what did you learn about yourself? So what did you learn about your leadership skills? Yeah. So how is that translated into now? And it's very humbling, actually. That's what I think about that experience, and unique. I've done lots of leadership training, and genuinely, the leadership experience of Windsor is unique and revelatory.
So Helen, what do you believe will be the key themes and challenges for leaders over the coming year?
The key challenges now for any leader, whether they run a tiny team or a huge team, an institution or a startup, is actually helping their business and therefore their workers adjust to the new reality of a life post-pandemic. And that means really being able to live in an incredibly volatile world, volatile economically, volatile socially, very stark divisions between all sorts of groups in societies or parts of the world. You know, as we speak, we don't know what's going to happen on the Ukrainian border. If you'd told me that even 6 months ago, I would have been astonished. If you read the Financial Times, you know that no one agrees on what's going to happen to any economy, let alone the world economy. So this has an impact on all leaders. You might think it's out there, but believe you me, it really does make a difference. And it absolutely encourages a degree of anxiety, which starts to be unhelpful at a certain point. So as a leader, you've got to, again, that word, listen and watch to what's happening in the outside world. Think about its impact on your business, your organization, and your team, and you, and think about how you can keep a steady course when you don't have all the information, and you know that this will be having an impact on the people who make your business work without you necessarily knowing directly from them that it's happening. I mean, even simple things like the working from home versus the not working from home is challenging. The managing technology, these basic things are not easy. And then there are some quite stark cultural divides between generations at the moment. So I've spoken to leaders at Windsor who are really struggling with how their younger staff, who you might caricature as being woke, do not share the same values as some of their older staff who believe they're liberal and generous and doing the right thing. Groups of people all thinking they're doing the right thing, but unfortunately it's a different right thing, is really hard for a leader. So I don't think there's going to be a lack of challenges, put it like that. And I think, again, Windsor will be very important because the programs allow the truth of those challenges to be surfaced, and then for individuals to think hard about themselves, their impact on their teams and their businesses, and their impact on the wider society. Most people I've met at Windsor have such decent values. They really care about public service and the common good. And that's not necessarily because they're all from public service organisations. You know, commercial companies can do that too, absolutely. So it's going to be a time of both reflection, but acute awareness of what's going on in the outside world. So you've got to learn to trust yourself, but be open. And you've got to engender trust in your teams so that they can manage a degree of anxiety that a lot of them will be finding very difficult.
Helen, why do you believe Windsor leadership in particular will be effective in supporting leaders through these challenges over the coming year?
I believe Windsor leadership will help leaders at every stage of their career uniquely because of its emphasis on self-reflection, self-understanding, but not done in like a monk, you know, in a kind of hole somewhere, but with a team that you learn to trust, a peer group that you learn to trust, that you spend time with, and who have the capacity through those bonds of trust and knowledge to both give you really positive feedback on your strengths and weaknesses and some tough messages in a way that actually you think, hurrah, that's so useful. It's very hard to give genuinely warm, encouraging feedback that's negative. And somehow within those groups on the programs we run, people hear things about themselves that they probably already know, but they hear it differently, and they also hear how they can mitigate it. This is not an easy process, and it is, I think, specific to the way we run our programs that this happens. And that's important because at times of extreme insecurity and volatility, leaders have to set a steady course for their teams and their businesses, even if they don't have full information. They still have to give a sense of, we're going from here to here. This is our strategy. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what we need to talk about. This is what we need to do. When it goes wrong, this is how we need to deal with things going wrong. These are big things. And I genuinely believe that Windsor helps self-trust in leaders without complacency. And that is fantastically important. It also encourages self-care. I mean, this is a bit ironic for me because when I was working, I was a complete workaholic and wasn't really interested in self-care. But I have learned through the latter part of my career how unwise that was. I got glandular fever twice. That's a bit of a, you know, your body telling you. And I now feel very strongly that the hinterland of somebody is vital in them being a good leader. Equally, it's important because your staff do not leave behind their hinterland, their history, their family dynamics when they come to work. They bring it all with them. And although you don't sit around and have therapy sessions, as a good leader, you need to keep an awareness that, you know, this stuff is brought to work and does make a difference to how people react to each other and to the needs of your business. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of growing of emotional intelligence that I think Windsor really offers. And that's a great journey of discovery for individuals, for teams, and for the organisations that send them. And it will help in a time of great uncertainty, I believe.
So thank you, Helen, for joining us, and thank you for listening to this Windsor Leadership podcast. And also have a look at our online resources. We have a website available at windsorleadership.org.uk. And if you've been through one of our programmes, then we have the Windsor Alumni Portal at windsoralumni.org.uk.